and welcome to DigFin VOX, Voices in Digital Finance. I'm your host, Jame DiBiasio. If you enjoy the program, give us a like, share, subscribe. My guest today is SK Saraogi, who is the new head of expansion and banking relationships for Asia Pacific at Wise. I spoke with SK about the two core parts to Wise, the remittance part, as well as a new platforms business, what that means for its relationships with banks, and big trends in payments and fintech that Wise is riding in APAC and around the world. Shrawan Saraogi, SK from Wise, welcome to DigFin VOX.
Thanks for having me, Jame.
So you are now it's been about half a year since you have become the head of expansion and banking for Wise in Asia Pacific in Singapore. So congrats on the new job.
Thank you.
Before we get into it, just as an icebreaker, you are universally known as SK, but in your LinkedIn bio, I don't see the K. So where's the K? I lost an S in my name. So you gained a K. So I'm just curious how you were able to get one of these letters.
So the full name is Shravan Kumar Saraogi. But yeah, I've been known as SK for the longest time. And over time, I realized it's a lot easier on others, so I don't trouble them. Okay. And I just introduce myself as SK now.
So simplifying names also, I guess, segues into simplifying payments. I'm good. Okay.
Yeah, you have a career in marketing as well.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm okay. Next career move. Great. So SK, Wise is obviously born in the UK, but now very much a global business. You've been in Asia for quite some time, and I guess I know you personally as as a consumer-facing app that allows me to move money across borders in a cheap and effective way. You leverage the banking system because you need to keep accounts in many banks in these different markets. But obviously you are a competitor to banks in that regard. At the same time, you've got a platform business that is, I think, pretty recent, right? I mean, at least in this region, you've only had it for about a year or so. So walk us through, let's just get started with the difference between the remittance side of Wise and the platform side.
Sure. Let me explain the concept first, and then we can go into how long we've been doing this. So at the end of the day, we've built a product for consumers that is dependent on an infrastructure, right? That infrastructure includes our banking partnerships. It includes our licenses. It includes direct integrations into various payment schemes.
Okay.
And then the platform business is essentially taking that and offering it to banks or other financial services, or even sometimes non-financial institutions. Why do we do that? Essentially, our mission is to make cross-border payments faster, cheaper, more convenient. And we're quite flexible if that's us enabling that through our own app or website, or if we're doing that through the apps or websites of other institutions. And so what we realized a few years back is that this was happening very organically, where there were banks who didn't have great cross-border offerings, and they were sending their customers to Wise and saying, hey, for cross-border needs, you should be using that. And that's what sparked the idea and said, how about if we could use this infrastructure and provide that to these banks or other institutions and allow these customers to conveniently, within those very apps which they're using for day-to-day banking needs, we also be able to do cross-border payments. It's helping us achieve the mission, while it's changing the nature of our relationship with a lot of these large organizations, as you said, from one of competition to that of cooperation and partnership.
I know there's some banks that just won't work with you. There are other banks that are very happy to partner with you. What tends to set the pace there in terms of if a relationship is going to be purely competitive, very cooperative, or maybe a little bit of competition, a little bit of cooperation, depending on the service?
Yeah, I think we've seen a good mix. a lot of it falls somewhere in the middle, where even if we partner up, even if we are providing the infrastructure to these organizations, doesn't mean we don't in some ways sometimes compete, right? So some customers might still end up wanting to use Wise directly. However, the type of customer that you said, or a potential partner that wants to just strictly remain as competition, I think that's a question of time. Because what we've seen is that somebody might start there, but over time, we're able to bring them around. Or at least that's how we think of them, where they get warmer. And the reason is we're able to show that we're really, truly trying to help. And one of the ways we do that is by using data and showing them how many of their customers are coming to us for cross-border services. And we'd be very happy for those customers to start using these services through their own apps. And at some point, we're able to break through that and work together. So I feel like, yeah, it's somewhere in the middle. We want this to be more cooperation and partnership. Sometimes it starts as competition, but we're very happy to play the slow game and then bring them along.
Yeah, I guess it's never going to be perfect. I know that HSBC in the UK launched Zing, which they kind of deliberately said is a Wise killer app. And I don't think they work with you here in Hong Kong. But, obviously some banks must be suffering because, they don't provide the best rates. And so you must be taking, in some cases, quite a lot of flow from them. And with interest rates now high, maybe they didn't mind too much. I mean, you got a start when we had a zero interest rate environment. Nobody could see the end of it. So holding deposits was, holding on to money in an account, and there wasn't that much float to enjoy. You could do stuff with it, but it wasn't. Now, today, you've got, you can make a lot of money by holding on to customer deposits. So is that changing the way that, I mean, you must be earning some revenue on that as a business, but also is that changing the relationship with different providers now that it's so valuable to keep that deposit in place?
I think so, definitely. So on the first part, are we earning revenue on that? Definitely we are, because of the interest rate environment. If you follow our public announcements as part of our quarterly updates, you'll see that we are very careful to point out what's coming from this increase in interest rate. And we want to make sure that the market doesn't expect that, because we want to be clear that this is happening because of the environment, nothing that we're doing differently. And as the interest rate environment changes, we may not enjoy that, right? So that's it. So it's definitely been great for us financially, but we also recognize that it's not something that's going to stay around forever. In terms of the relationship with providers or banks, I don't think that in itself has made a huge difference as to how they look at us. I feel like, because a lot of them are also benefiting from this, right? So in some ways, I don't think it would make that much of a difference to them. So I wouldn't say that this has been a big cause of that. But at the same time, as time goes on and as Wise's own volumes grow, I think definitely then people start taking notice, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so do we see more attention? Do we see more people either wanting to launch their own offering? And we have publicly been we're very happy that someone like HSBC came up with a Zing offering, because we think that's better for customers. That's more choice, that's more transparency, that's better prices. So we're very happy if we're able to inspire others to do that. But at the same time, we're very confident that what we're building and the infrastructure that we have and at the scale that we've done it at, even for a lot of large banks, it may not be worthwhile for them to replicate that, and they may be better off to just partner with us and leverage what we've built for customers.
Let's dig into the platform side of the business for a little bit, SK. Talk me through a little bit about what that implies. I mean, you touched on a very surface level description, but really maybe this is also where we can bring it into Asia, because we have so many different fragmented markets here. What are some of the specific pain points that exist that your platform is aimed to address, and how do you ride off of a lot of the infrastructure that's being built domestically rather quickly in many markets here.
Sure. So let me take a specific APAC example without giving you any names, right? So there are large regional banks that could be extremely big in their specific market or a few markets, but they don't necessarily have the same coverage as we may, for example, in UK or Europe or Australia or Japan. And that's where we're able to come in and say, hey, we have in some instances direct integration with local payment schemes. We have infrastructure set up to enable fast, cheap payments in these markets. And with a relatively simple and quick integration, these organizations or these banks in some cases can offer that to their customers without themselves having to go into that market and set up those infrastructures and whatnot, which may not be worth it for them to just serve customers in a handful of markets. But for us, it was worth that capital investment and building that infrastructure because we're serving customers globally. So that's the kind of example, that one thing that I can say, where leverage our global infrastructure, where it may not be worth it for you to build yourself.
Right.
I think the second thing is, if you followed our announcements last year at Sibos, where we talked about a partnership with Swift, this was our attempt at saying that there were banks that were interested in what we offered, but maybe their tech and infrastructure was not ready for the API solution that we had. And so what we've done now is that we're able to partner with them in a way that they're quite used to how they work with correspondent banks already. And we're like, we will work with you in a similar manner where you don't have to make any material changes to your tech and your processes and still benefit from that better infrastructure, which basically leads to better product for the customer. So those are the kind of advantages that we think we can offer and why even large organizations are considering us very seriously.
I want to switch gears back to the remittance side of the business, your peer-to-peer side. In Asia, we're seeing many markets, and not just here, but I think it's being led here from India through Southeast Asia in particular, where domestic payment systems are being bilaterally knitted together, usually by governments or government-linked agencies. And it's now possible for somebody in Singapore to visit a neighboring country and use a QR code and pay for things, and it just comes straight out of their DBS bank account, and vice versa, right? Someone from Thailand or India. So to what extent as this infrastructure develops, how are you rethinking about the corridors that make sense for Wise? Because in that case, maybe somebody in Singapore doesn't need Wise if they want to necessarily send money or do something, some sort of remittance, either back and forth to Thailand. Walk me through that. I mean, are these unrelated, or do you see that there's evolution in the infrastructure that causes you to have to think about where it makes sense for Wise to play?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So first and foremost, I think we are very happy that governments and regulators are getting involved. They are recognizing the importance of cross-border payments, and they feel something should be done about it. So we're quite happy that our mission is resonating with governments and regulators. Secondly, should this impact how we think about it and how we prioritize? Most certainly it should. We definitely need to see where the need is more. Are there legitimate alternatives? And so how much is our product needed? Mm-hmm. Having said that, at least so far, we haven't seen it really impact our decisions yet. Okay. And there's a few reasons for that. One is we think there's enough room for multiple solutions to exist in the market. And there are different customers who might want to access similar offerings through different providers, through different platforms and whatnot, right? So one is we're not seeing any material difference yet. Also, maybe because these are at very early stages. They're still pilots, the linkages that you're talking about. The other thing is, at this point, while the intent is very good, but if you go a little bit deeper, you'll realize that some of the things that we stand by and why we think we need to exist are not necessarily being taken care of in these solutions. For example, transparency. So how we put our fee very clearly, how we use mid-market rates for any transaction that we do, that's not the case for a lot of these linkages, right? And so we do think that until that happens, there's something that we're offering that is superior. Secondly, the rates that are being offered, even from a cost perspective, it is higher. It's also a little bit unclear who sets that. There are a lot of players involved, but not everybody gets to decide how they want to. So when you take a few of that together, we find that, again, it's a step in the right direction. We encourage it as we encourage any kind of competition, but at this point of time, we're quite confident in what we offer. There's value prop for customers, and they're going to continue want to use that.
Where over the medium term do you see the business potentially developing? So right now you're doing some on the platform side, you've got some business functionality there. You help merchants, small businesses or individuals manage expenses, account payables and so on. Maybe you can tell me a little bit more about where you see that suite of products going. And ultimately, I'm interested. This is obviously, I think of you as sort of a non-credit card based provider. You're wallet to wallet. I'm just curious if you see some of this entering into spaces that might have been either traditionally considered the purview of the card networks, or if you would get into acquiring at some point. Just where do you see this thing developing?
So there's a few parts to that. One is that our business offering hasn't gone as deep in APAC as it has in other parts of the world. So if you look at our Europe and UK, that growth is massive, and we see that adoption being really high. And that's one of the things that we're looking to do here, which is not only make sure that from a feature set perspective, we're cutting edge, but also from a awareness perspective, we want more people to realize and think of us as someone not only serving consumers, but also businesses. So that's the first thing I just want to say in terms of our plan. We do have big plans on that front across APAC markets. I think secondly, we definitely have no intentions to enter the credit space, as you said, and we're going to very much remain in helping businesses manage their money and move their money, right? And as part of that is where some of the features that you said come in. We find that increasingly a lot of our potential customers or existing ones use us is because businesses are naturally becoming more international now. And so that's a trend that's also working for us, whereby with increasing share of volumes of the business that they do being cross-border means what we offer, even in some cases where it may be similar to other offerings, but it becomes that much more important because the speed, the price, the convenience of a cross-border offering becomes very relevant and becomes very meaningful. So that's why I feel like, yes, there may be differences, but we're definitely able to compete and grow. On the acquiring side, I would say, so two things I want to say. You mentioned schemes in acquiring. So one is we partner with them, right? So of course, we're issuing cards in partnership with schemes. From an acquiring perspective, maybe I'm not thinking of that in the traditional way of scheme-based acquiring, but we definitely are helping customers collect money.
Okay.
Right. In that sense, we are a very much legitimate option and alternative to other ways or other acquiring methods for them to be able to collect money. A very good example is we're able to offer account details in many currencies for a customer. Let's say a business customer in Singapore can get a USD account detail, whereby somebody can make a local US payment into that account, right? And then our customer can choose, do they want to store that money in US dollar? Do they want to convert it to Sing dollar or any other currency? And so that's generally like some of the use cases that we see becoming more and more relevant, and we generally see that this segment is going to grow alongside a consumer and platform segments.
Yeah. So in the remittance side, it was pretty easy to say, okay, well, I could compare you to say Remitly or to Payoneer or some of these other players. And then as you go into the platform side, it starts to look more like you're going head to head with big players like Stripe, perhaps, or Adyen, or also some of the locally grown pay variants on the tech companies here. A lot of competition. So how do you pick your spots? Like, what are the merchant niches or use case that you think you can establish a beachhead and grow from there?
So I think the simplest way I can answer this is the cross-border element, right? So that's definitely our focus area, our strength and expertise. And so we try to enter spaces where that's an important element. And we often find we're able to compete as a result of that, right? Because we've set our business up and the infrastructure in a way that allows us to scalably offer a product that's cheaper, faster, more convenient, right? So that's at a high level. I think specifically, it's interesting because a lot of the names that you mentioned, yes, it's true that they can be competition. But what's interesting is a lot of them are also those that we're supporting on the cross-border front. And so it goes back to what we were speaking about earlier. It's like it's a good mix. Mm-hmm. And we want to move these relationships from that extreme end of competition towards somewhere in the middle to the other end of cooperation and partnership, while there may still exist some competition. But yeah, but I do think that there's still some distinction in the exact offering that we have versus what they have. And the cross-border market, or just the digital payments market, is just growing so much globally as well as in APAC, that we find that there's enough for all of us to continue growing and still have a space for ourselves while also cooperating in specific parts.
How much of your business is focused on remittances or money transfers for paying for things versus, say, e-commerce?
Right. Yeah, no, I think, unfortunately, we don't typically break that down publicly. So it's hard for me to give you that. But the reality is it's a very good mix, right? And that's something that we've very consciously done. Going back to names and dropping parts of our name. And so for Wise as well, we used to be TransferWise, we became Wise, is because one of the things that was already happening is that we started transitioning from just being a remittance or a transfer focused company to one that was doing a lot more, that included collections, that included serving businesses, that included holding money and managing money, right? And so that was the trend, not just when we changed the name, but that's continued on. And so generally, I would say it's a very healthy mix. And we're quite consciously making sure that we continue to build all of these different pillars up, so we're not very dependent on about one particular line of business.
Yeah. When you introduced Wise Platform in this region, I think your first clients were in Australia, but it's a big, diverse region. So I'd love to get your sense, if you can, on what markets or what corridors are you most excited about right now?
So on the Wise Platform front, I can tell you a few markets where we're seeing a lot more activity. You'll realize that there's a lot more public information around that. So definitely some of the more mature markets, such as Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, are the ones where you will already find that we have a lot of big partnerships. I think there's a couple of reasons why, because of the advancement of digital banking and fintechs in general, whereby a lot of them have licenses, a lot of them have grown their business, and now cross-border is an element where we are plugging for them.
You just did an announcement with Mox Bank, for example, in Hong Kong.
You're right. So we recently announced that, and So exactly that. So those are the kind of Aspire in Singapore, for example, right? So we also recently announced something we've done with Tiger Brokers in Singapore. So these are the natural ones, but we're slowly also starting to focus in some of the other markets where we're really early movers. And even if digital banking may not have taken on yet, but we're making sure that we're catching on the trend whereby banks themselves are becoming more digital, and we want to be a partner to them. And so you're going to hear more about some of these solutions as well. We've announced some of the partnerships we've had in Indonesia and Thailand before, but we expect to have more of these going forward as well.
Yeah. And with the virtual banks or the neobanks or whatever word we want to use, new banks that are digital, I guess in some ways it's easy to work with them. They don't have, you're not taking anything away from them. There's no competitive edge that, there's no friction there. They're small and they need to help to grow. So just where do you see in terms of the overall trends for digital banks in the region? Where do you see them expanding? And what are you expecting will become a future source of partnership and business for you?
I think, and this may be an opinion, but one of the trends I feel might happen is that a lot of the digital banks got their licenses in the last few years, and they've spent maybe the last 2-3 years building the basic infrastructure, building a brand in their home markets. And they all, or at least a few of them, have sizable customer bases that they're serving. And then they're expanding the product lines that they can offer, which is where cross-border comes in. What I feel might happen in the future is some of them are going to start hitting some form of saturation in their home markets and then start expanding in other markets. It's quite obvious, even some of the Singapore digital banks, if you look at the amount of capital they've had to put up front, it's very difficult for them to pay that back.
Just by being domestic. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's one trend I foresee happening. And that's again where that bodes well for us, because that means more cross-border business for them. And they would want to support their own customers in multiple markets to be able to do things across those markets. And so we should be able to partner up with them. So that's definitely a trend I see happening. I think the other one will be, as they also expand, they may want to support their customers to collect money in different markets, hold money in multiple currencies. So some of the basic things, as well as functionality expands beyond basic banking. A lot of that is, again, where our strengths lie.
Yeah. And how about with the fintech sector, which is very broad, right? I mean, I intend it to be broad. It could be everything from insurtech to wealth tech to some blockchain company, yada, yada. Where do you see that cross-border expansion happening here? Are there particular parts of the fintech world that you expect to be important customer base going forward?
Of course, we want to serve anyone that has cross-border needs, and increasingly, if you're a fintech or if you're a tech firm of any sort, including non-fintechs, there's a cross-border element, right? Just the way these firms are funded, there's an expectation of growth, and so there's always the likelihood that they're going to be global businesses. So that's just as a overarching statement that we feel we have something to do with most of them. I think specific areas of fintechs is, the obvious ones are the digital banks and the payments companies, the e-wallets. So we find, again, going back to the same thing, some of them compete with us in markets where they are very strong in their home markets, but oftentimes they want to serve their customers when they go abroad, and that's where we come in and plugging that. So definitely that part. Beyond that, maybe a little bit case by case, where what's interesting is that our offerings, sometimes the API offerings we have are not just for some of these fintech or tech companies to serve their customers. We do have online platforms that we serve that are using us for their own treasury needs as well, because they are so global in nature that they want to use us, including our API solutions, to manage that complexity of being in many markets, wanting payroll in many markets or suppliers in many markets. So yeah, in general, I feel like there's opportunities all along, but of course, the ones that are closer to the payments, even if not cross-border directly, we find that it's easier to plug in directly. But even things like wealth tech, for example, is a very good example where some of them, like Tiger Brokers being a good real-life example, where we're supporting them for customers when they want to invest their money, right? And they want to do that from another currency or another market, we can support collecting that. Or when customers are taking money out, we can help them get it to where they want to. So yeah, there's always some use case, I find.
Yeah. And a big topic in Hong Kong, and I think also in Singapore, is stable coins. The governments are, trying to figure out a way to regulate or authorize or make these things work. As you look at the landscape, what does that mean to you? Is it relevant? Do you have a view on whether this is going to be something that's going to impact your business or become an opportunity?
I think, is it relevant? Definitely, right? And we're watching trends, CBDC or otherwise, constantly, and making sure that we understand them, and where relevant, we are adapting and evolving. Specifically here, we don't think it's reached a level of maturity where it will directly impact our business at this point of time, but I think we definitely need to keep a close eye. But at the same time, we feel like at some point, if you play that out and if things go perfectly, even in that scenario, we find a role for people like us that are building the infrastructure to move these, right? So whether that's fiat currency or tomorrow there's another form of currency, you still need infrastructure to move it fast, to move it cheap, to move it efficiently, and essentially bring on that customer view and customer centricity. So that's at a high level how we think about it, and that's how we're constantly thinking. So rather than thinking how we're going to compete with it, we're thinking how can we adopt that and basically at the end of the day continue achieving our mission. But to be very honest, at this point, we don't see a very direct impact yet.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, SK, grateful for your time today. Thanks for joining me on DigFin VOX. I think we've covered a lot of ground. And maybe next time we do this, we'll have some new markets, some new services, and who knows, even maybe some new currencies in the mix. So thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you.